organizational architecture, those are the non-negotiables. Those are the building blocks that an organization has to have in place in order to give life to a particular strategy. So these are those essentials that without which you don't actually move from strategic planning to strategic implementation, let alone imagining that you're going to do some form of evaluation as well. The one deficiency we have with this course is that we don't really transition to evaluation, and I've questioned that before, but the simple truth is we seem to focus on the planning itself and the implementation, and this obviously is a key part of that implementation. You can see the objectives there, no dramas there whatsoever. Right, we'll skip over that. So when we talk about organizational architecture, I said a couple of times that this textbook is very modern in terms of the theories that it uses. It is very modern in terms of the best practices that they include. And this is one of the newer best practices. It's I suppose it's a renaming and a slightly rebranding and a refurbishing, if that's the right word, of what we've always had in place. There are certain things that are different in terms of organizational architecture from traditional implementation processes. The first one is that this is not done haphazardly. It is a formal document, and you can think of it as a policy document. And in that policy document, we need to know what the purpose of the business is. Remember, we're saying they're clarifying what the business is about, where in the strategic management process we are as part of its unfolding, but also, more importantly, how this is actually going to work. The second thing that we look at there are the key strategic drivers within the organization. Now, those key strategic drivers are, again, the non-negotiables, the things that if we don't have them in place, we don't have a strategic plan, we don't have a strategy implementation process. And then we have this, and I quite like that term there, the so-called blueprint. Every single organizational architecture is unique to the organization. It is not something that you can go to a consultant and a consultant can arrive with a blueprint in terms of this is what organizational architecture is. It is something that's personalized per the organization. It's as unique as the organization's vision or as unique as the organization's mission statement, as well as the structure, etc. So this blueprint is based around the realities of your organization. It's based around the essential features which have to be in place in order to give life to your strategic plan. The last one is the one that's slightly more difficult to achieve, is to actually get everyone on board in terms of agreeing that this is the way forward. Now, when we talk about all constituencies, I don't know why they don't use stakeholders, and I can understand why they don't use stakeholders in the same breath, but it certainly has to have top, middle, junior management support. It has to have support of your professional staff, of your key role players within the organization amongst your employees. But the key word always there is doing more with less and leaving a real impact. I think we've spoken about how people prioritize their resources so that we put resources where they matter, and that where those resources matter is where they have the biggest customer impact. And this is the reality that we're faced with here. We want to make sure that we use what we have to our benefit in order to get maximum strategic plan achievement with minimum input. So if we look at definitions of organizational architecture, a couple there, all saying the same thing, just literally just a different theorist's view on each of these. The first one, the supposed model of this organization, and key in terms of that, everyone on board in seeing that model and seeing their role within that model and making things happen. This one takes it a step further, and it looks more like our second year textbook when we spoke about what was required as part of strategic implementation, those systems, those structures, those processes, technologies, etc. You could have also shoved in things like policies and culture into that allow the organization to operate. And then again, the idea of a blueprint and how we use that blueprint to impress our key stakeholders, how we get our constituencies on board, and how we impress our stakeholders. The last one, again, taking the view that it's about stakeholder needs, but also this kind of blueprint, this document that is widely communicated so that every single person sees a role for themselves within that, and making sure that we have, and I like this term here, those major building blocks in place to give life to the strategic plan. So in essence, it is a formal document. It is a formal document agreed to by every single player in the organization that indicates the non-essentials that have to be in place in giving life to this organization's strategic plan. In terms of those non-negotiables, I think I said non-essentials, my apologies, those non-negotiables has to have something around your structure, has to have something around the culture, has to have something around your employees, has to have something around policies and systems and procedures that would then provide the framework for us to implement our organization's strategic plan. Now, the way that we read this, and please note, I've done this at the bottom here, is that it reads from right to left. So we're reading it in that direction. And it starts with your stakeholders. The modern approach to organizations and the modern approach to structures within organizations is that we are there to create stakeholder wealth. Now, what is quite nice about that stakeholder wealth definition, it is also the first thing we said in terms of this entire year of what the new definition of strategic success is. The idea of sustainability within strategic management processes. So strategic success is now that kind of wealth holder, that's stakeholder wealth creation. Then we take it a step back from there. Once we've identified our stakeholders, what are the capabilities that we require? Now, we spoke about those core competencies, those capabilities that allow us to maximize what we can get out of our resources. Also, we spoke about the dynamic capabilities, those capabilities that allow us to renew ourselves, that allow us to remain fresh and repurpose the organization. We will also look at those processes obviously relating to transformation, turning our inputs into products and services. We know what the structure and systems are, structure, the way people report to each other, systems, formalized organizational arrangements, which will include policies and procedures, knowledge, skills, and abilities as related to the employees, the technologies that we use, and remember, it's the interface between information and telecommunications and transport and other technologies, and also the role of artificial intelligence in that, and then culture. And it's interesting to see how they put culture as an underpinning force. So unless you have the culture, a culture where we do things in a particular way to promote the success of an organization, you have nothing whatsoever. So remember to read this left to right, and then we will take it from there. I mean right to left, my apologies. Guys, please look at those pages. Jen, if you can share them on the group, that would be fantastic. If somebody could take pictures and share them on the group. Right, so let's start from the right and work back to the left. So the first one are your stakeholders. Now, when we think of stakeholders, stakeholders are those individuals that are impacted by the business, that benefit from the operations of the business, that as the organization changes, we'll see changes within the relationship with the organization. But the focus is that without these stakeholders, our organization doesn't exist. And without our organization, these stakeholders don't have opportunities for wealth creation. So these are those individuals that have, and the key term there is that one there, a vested interest in the running of the organization. For employees, that vested interest means that I have a job, that I earn a living, that I can take care of my family. So that the reality in terms of that vested interest is that there's a direct link between the success of the organization and the wealth and success of those particular employees. The second thing is that they're impacted by the outcomes of the organization's activities. So again, whether you're an employee, it's salary; whether you're a customer, it's products and services that you get. If you are a shareholder, it's the dividends that gets paid out to you. If you're a supplier to the organization, it is part of the supply chain process and your rewards for being part of that supply chain. We also have done this before, the difference between primary and secondary stakeholders. I think the simple truth is primary stakeholders, a direct impact and impacted directly by the organization. Secondary stakeholders, a less of a direct impact and also less of a direct being impacted by the organization. So if we look at the stakeholders here, and what they've decided to do is just to give us an example of how stakeholders are impacted. They used TQM. You now know what TQM is, the introduction in terms of TQM and how that would impact the various stakeholders. From a shareholder perspective, it should give you a higher return on investment, because with TQM, where we make people responsible for their own quality, where everyone has a customer, where it's your duty to impress that customer, the knock-on effect is that you should have a greater return on investment because of the efficiencies and the fact that you're not going to rework and your customers are impressed by whatever the products are that we create. The second one, employees. From an employee perspective, often related to the culture, because what we know about, what we specifically know about how TQM operates is that it is a change in culture where employees are given a chance to take charge of their lives at work. In terms of taking charge of their lives at work, it really is that kind of autonomy that is handed to them as well. From a customer perspective, and I've said this already, better products and services, because TQM is about getting things right the first time and getting it right every time. From supplier perspective, because you understand what the requirements are, because you understand as a supplier what the standards are that you need to maintain, you would enjoy better contracts. And then communities at large would be, because the organization's more successful, you would be able to provide better response in terms of, I'm teaching in my son's room, whose alarm is going off behind me here. It would benefit from jobs, would benefit from better products and services, and also better social responsiveness. All right, so let's look at capabilities. We've just done this a couple of times. What I quite like about this chapter, it's a bit of a wrapping paper over the entire program. It brings together every single element that we've discussed, and it's a perfect bookend to the start of the process where we spoke about stakeholder wealth and wealth creation and the idea of what modern strategic management was about in February this year. And this is the other bookend of that and tying those together. So we've spoken about capabilities. Remember, we spoke about the difference between resources and capabilities. Resources, the things that we have, the raw materials, the money, the finances, those kinds of things. Capabilities allow us to maximize what we can get out of our resources. So capabilities allow us to get the most out of our resources. In terms of those capabilities, they have to be variable because it depends on the strategy adopted. If you move from a cost-saving approach to approach based around differentiation, for example, you immediately have to repurpose your capabilities. Cost-saving capabilities are about making sure that everything we do is to reduce the per unit cost of an item. Differentiation capabilities is about innovation, it's about impressing, it is about above and beyond. And immediately, as the strategy changes, the capabilities would have to be repurposed as well. Please also look at 470.17.3. Jen, if you can stick that on the group, that would be fantastic. Processes are your planning, organizing, leading, and controlling things, so nothing new. And remember what I said, the way that this chapter bookends this here, but it also is a bookend to the entire degree, because this is stuff that we've learned in first semester, in first year, and now we get to the final bookend, and that's what I quite like about the way that this chapter is structured. So when we talk about management processes, the things we look at there, your planning, your organizing, your leading, controlling, but more importantly, it is the work methods. It is how we go about creating value, how we go about creating the transformation from inputs into products and services. It is also the roles that are allocated to employees. Now, we've spoken about this. In traditional organizations, the roles we allocate come in the form of a job description. So there you have a list of duties, and the idea is if you do those duties and you tick box each of them, you should be able to do your job. Sorry, this is now annoying me. Where the modern way is, we want this thing that you are going to build to do that. Your role is to make it happen. We don't care too much about the guidance. So often new employees like the idea of those duties. I prefer this one. The thing that we build must do that. We don't care how you make it happen. So the roles clearly defined in terms of what the employees have to do. Taken from the roles, the work agenda, and it really is the priorities of what must be done by when. So we think of the priorities. Please hold on a second, guys. I'm just going to